EA Sports WRC came out almost 2 years ago. I bought it on release and was satisfied. After a fair share of campaign gameplay, I kind of just forgot about it and had a lengthy hiatus. Still, the yearning for gravel returns without fail, and I've decided to see how the game has changed over several content updates and DLC packs, which, I was told, were so good that EA shut down Codemasters, the studio with almost 30 years of rally game legacy. I love the games industry. Isn't it so healthy and sustainable? Anyway, if this was going to be Cody's last project, I felt like I owed it to them to check it out. If you're curious where this leaves WRC the series, then the license has apparently returned back to Kiloton, for whatever reason. Anyway, let's go over the basics again before discussing the new content. I don't think the physics have been substantially altered since release, at least not that I can tell. What I said in my video 2 years ago still stands. The wheels on your car still feel overly stable when cornering, compared to Dirt Rally 2, and I kind of miss how spin-happy some of the harder cars to control were. However, overall, I must say I still find the physics enjoyable. I have no idea which game is more realistic, and that doesn't really matter to me. This one is still fun and satisfying. Controlling some of the faster cars along some really narrow and tight sections is still rewarding as ever, and the slightest bit of unexpected over or understeer is all that separates a healthy car from a battered one. Wrestling a front-wheel drive machine to rotate for a fast corner is so much fun, as is taming a rear-wheel drive beast to nicely take a sharp bend. For all I know, this might be a downgrade in realism, but a notch down from great is still very good indeed. I also found myself surprised at how much I enjoyed the career. When reading discussions on this game, I was shocked at the amount of sentiment people hold towards the Dirt Rally 2 career mode, which I thought was no more complex and advanced than that of Need for Speed Underground, which came out 20 years earlier. I get it, some people just want to get in a car and go. However, I want more strategy to my games. The WRC campaign is more engaging, with you having specific targets to hit every season and having to choose one action to perform every week. You will have to balance achieving set targets, winning event rewards, managing your team of engineers and weekly budgets. It's not some grand strategy type of gameplay, but it's engaging enough. However, there just isn't any randomness as far as the calendar goes. It's basically the same thing every year, and even the stages within events seem to be repeating, year in, year out. Some locations, such as Greece, desperately needed more stage variety, as they felt the most repetitive when engaging in long-scale rallies there. Dirt Rally 2 career could also get repetitive, but the randomized nature kept things fresh a bit better. I also feel like money shouldn't just be boiled down to weekly budget targets. Saving up money to buy a new car and then finally getting to drive it is a staple for many racing games, and this one lacks this special moment. It also means that the benefactor has effectively infinitely deep pockets and could afford you anything, except that would breach your contract agreements. I think the best part of this game is the stage design. Most of them are just really fun to drive around and feel quite unique and special. It feels like each stage was designed with great care and passion, while also providing specific challenges. There's a lot of verticality, technical sections and features giving unique vibes. All these variables combined allow for a really wide range of corners and profiles. Greece is full of extremely tight and twisty roads, which make any front-wheel drive car shudder in horror, but are a blast to take with a four-wheel drive. Estonia is fast as fuck boy, with series of hay-bale chicanes to slow you down. Central Europe jumps between straight white tarmac roads and twisty mountain ascents. Cobbled roads of a small town in Mexico, especially constructed technical sections in Pacifico, and even a freaking racetrack in Portugal are just some of the features you'll be passing in this game. I think my favorite has to be Kenya. It's probably the most aggressively bumpy location, and switches between wide and sweeping roads of fine sand and a coarse gravelly section that requires any car to be wrestled around corners. The most special part about it has to be the 1000 call. That's right, a full kilometer of bumpy, sandy, flat-out worrying about the slightest mistake, sending you to the Shadow Realm.
4 right short, 1000.
I went back and played a session of Dirt Rally 2 time trials, just to see how this game compares to WRC. As far as the physics goes, I immediately noticed how much harder it is to turn. For some reason, there's a huge delay between my steering input and the car actually starting to rotate. I also found that once a car breaks traction, it loses a huge amount of grip. What I mean by that is cars really don't like going around a corner and will just keep sliding for what feels like forever, and in this state they're more likely to spin out or otherwise lose control. I also found the sense of speed to be severely lacking when compared to WRC. Look at this, I'm hurtling at speeds over 150 km an hour, and it just doesn't feel like a big deal. Meanwhile, WRC makes speeds far lower than that look spectacular. Back in my first video on WRC, I mentioned how the physics felt simplified when compared to Dirt Rally 2, but playing both games back to back today, it doesn't really feel like that anymore. I haven't found any information about the physics getting overhauled, so I don't really know what's going on here. In fact, I'm finding the rear-wheel drive Group B monsters to be far more difficult to control than in the yesteryears. Overall, I much enjoyed driving in WRC, mainly due to the better sense of speed and tracks, but also the cars just felt a lot more predictable. While Dirt Rally 2's handling was probably more challenging, I was almost relieved to shut it down to go back to WRC. Maybe it's down to familiarity, or maybe the default setups are just better, but I'd pick the newer game to play today. Alright, how about we actually start discussing the new content released for WRC? The Locations and Cars content pack adds 2 new locations, 5 new cars and a bunch of liveries. The purpose of this all was to bring the game up to date with the 2024 WRC season. I personally felt like the game already had plenty of locations, so adding more stages to existing locations would help alleviate the monotony of some rally events. However, said locations are pretty good. Latvia has similarly fast-paced and sweeping stages as Estonia, and Poland kind of just feels pretty generic and nondescript for the high standards of uniqueness set by other locations in this game. That is to say, it'd be top tier in Dirt Rally 2. 3 of the new cars are just 2024 versions of existing WRC1 cars, and they feel really similar to their predecessors. The remaining 2 are a Rally 3 and Rally 2 car, and they don't really feel special. Maybe it's just me, but in all modern rally sims, I find myself gravitating towards the older cars, sort of up to and including the Group A class. These cars often feel like they have more personality and are more fun to drive than these homogeneous modern WRC1, WRC2, JWRC, etc, etc. As a result, these additions don't feel important to me at all. But to be fair, this game already has a very wide selection of historical cars, and arguably doesn't need any more. Anyway, most of the DLC cars I've tried so far don't really feel all that different to drive than their peers from the same classes, so I won't be commenting on them again. This DLC also revamped the calendar in the career mode, altering the locations and event structure to incorporate the new locations. Most notably, the placement of service areas has been altered to be more even, and now you will never go more than 2 stages without a service in a major event. I think this makes sense, as having that awkward 3-stage stint in the previous calendar would pigeonhole you into specific strategies. Now the tire strategy feels like it plays out far more naturally. What's shocking to me is why this wasn't done later again with the upcoming content packs. There's still a lot of new stages to come, and none of them are accessible in the career mode. But anyway, the next DLC was Le Maestros. It actually adds new stages to the Portugal and Monte Carlo locations. Again, the calendar was not altered at all, meaning you won't get to drive them in the main game mode I play. The stages feel pretty on par with those already in the game, and neither have I played one that made me go, wow, this is so amazing, so far. Again, we've got some new cars, most of them being French. I've tried out the Peugeot 206 and the Citroën Xara, the latter of which feels a bit more obedient and predictable than the Peugeot 306, which is my default pick for the F2 Kit Cars class. This was the only DLC car that felt noticeably unique from their counterparts. And finally, this one stings the most. The Hard Chargers DLC added further stages to 2 more locations, Sweden and Greece, both of which I feel get pretty repetitive and monotonous within events in the career mode. Therefore, they'd be far more enjoyable rallies, with said breath of fresh air. But again, the calendar was not changed at all since the first content pack. You only get to play these new stages in custom championships or time trials. It's nice, I guess, but it feels kind of pointless to me if it's not part of a grander campaign. I cannot understand why they didn't revamp the calendars again. I suspect it might be too much work, given that now they would have to account for every possible combination of DLC being owned by the player. So effectively there'd be 8 different calendars in the game. But again, this would have been solved if the rallies themselves weren't so rigidly preset, and each event could be altered dynamically every season, or better yet, randomized completely. Was this done purely out of adherence to the real-life sport? I don't know. Oh, the content itself? Right. The new Sweden stages are pretty neat, and they feel distinctly more technical. However, the stage I tried had several long straights followed by a sharp square corner, the call for which was coming way too late for me to react in time.
To turn, 1 left, tightens, 90, 5 left, very long.
The Greece stage I don't even remember. Honestly, maybe that says all you need to know about it. The cars in this one are a mix of semi-modern and historical, so at least I'm more likely to try them. Not that any of them really blew me away though. And so we stand at the end of the road. Despite all the positive words I have for this game, how has it not achieved success of a matching magnitude to the talent behind it? I think there's a myriad of small problems biting away at it. First of all, the physics clearly didn't gel with many people. These days while playing, they feel more detailed in some ways over Dirt Rally 2. However, I also said in a video back on release that the physics felt simplified, and I wasn't alone in that assessment. I'm a pretty casual sim enjoyer, so my opinion on this topic shouldn't be held to a high regard, but what was important here was the people's perception. People felt the physics were unappealing and unrealistic, so not many found enjoyment in this game. Furthermore, there were and still are technical problems. On release, stutters were present on all systems. That specific problem is gone now, but the performance still isn't quite what I'd consider alright. It doesn't even look that great. I recently saw some screenshots from Dirt Rally 1 and was blown away by how realistic they looked. Yeah, there's some blur here and there, and some of the textures are kinda low res, but something about the colors and models looks so believable and authentic. I can't say WRC looks bad, because that's far from the truth, but something about it lacks a bit of character and charm compared to some previous titles. Furthermore, it's clear EA doesn't know how to handle racing game business models. Once they acquired Codemasters and the WRC license, they were obviously preparing to cynically milk it in a similar way to the F1 games. That model of releasing the same game every year with minimal changes is really starting to get under people's skin, as the sales numbers have been dropping consistently for the past few releases. However, it's financially sustainable and profitable for the corporate overlords so far. Thankfully, they have decided against releasing a new WRC game every year, and instead opted to release one game with future DLC drops. However, said content drops were underwhelming and felt kind of unnecessary. I mean, take the 2024 cars for example. They're virtually indistinguishable from the 2023 ones, and if it wasn't for the calendar revamp in the same expansion, I'd have felt ripped off back when this dropped. Unfortunately, that was also the biggest breath of fresh air, as new stages that I can't even race in my preferred game mode, and some alternate versions of cars that were already in the game, just wouldn't be enough, and indeed they weren't, to bring me back to the game. I say this because I only experienced this new content in the past few months, when all the DLC was already out, and I haven't touched the game for 1.5 years since release. I'm not sure what a better business model would have been. When some update or expansion drops for a game I lost interest in, I want to feel like there's a whole new world of possibilities, and that nothing will be the same. What about Rallycross? That mode was in Dirt Rally 2. I didn't enjoy it, but many people seemed to like it. What about updating the physics model? What about adding new variants of existing stages for different seasons? What about expanding the strategic layer of the career mode? There's so many things that could have brought me back to this game over the years, but weren't added. I'm not sure how the Codemasters studio responsible for all these rally games has ended. I saw a bunch of articles about most people getting stripped out and relocated to other projects, but I haven't seen a formal announcement of a shutdown either. I don't know what the first game I ever played was, but Colin McRae Rally 2 was certainly one of those. I was loosely following the studio over the years, buying a game here or there, but not all of them. Colin McRae Rally, Colin McRae Dirt, Dirt Rally, and now EA Sports WRC. The game took many names, but the same beating heart remained. It's never had the most realistic and believable physics, and wasn't trying to, but somehow Cody's always managed to make it fun as all hell. This talent hasn't gone away, but who knows to what purpose it will be put now. We might be left with a big vacuum in the high-budget rally sim space, and I sure hope someone comes to fill it up soon. Thanks for watching.